Well, hello, good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to our Divergent Discussion. My name's Michelle and I am the founder of Caboose. We are a community for neurodivergent people to connect, learn about our brains and thrive in whatever way that works for you. A central part of our app is our Neuro Nuggets, which are our short practical guides that help you understand your brain. So just a reminder, this Divergent Discussion is being recorded and will be uploaded to YouTube. We'll also have lots of time at the end for audience questions, so feel free to drop those into the chat. And I'm very excited to welcome Romina today. We did have an attempt to do this Divergent Discussion some time ago, but we both had technical difficulties, but here we are, we made it. So I'm very excited that we actually made it today. So Romina is a digital marketing strategist, writer and creator who blends data-driven insight with emotionally intelligent storytelling, probably something we can use here at Caboose. She is known for her authentic voice and the way she shares lived experiences of autism, ADHD with humour, depth and honesty. Romina explores the intersections of neurodivergence, creativity and culture in her content, building conversations that are validating and insightful. So welcome, Romina.
Thank you. What an awesome introduction. I'm so happy to be here.
Maybe let the audience know where you're joining from as well.
I'm in Florida. I'm in a city called Port St. Lucie in Florida in the United States. And for me, I know for you, a lot of you, it's 9 a.m. For me, it's 6:30 p.m. It's the end of the day.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I think it's so wild that we can be in such different time zones. I think it's super cool.
It is very cool. And you're heading into your summer and we're heading into our winter, which I also find interesting. But for us here in Australia, even though we hit the 1st of May today, so very close to winter, we are expecting a day of 27. So a very warm day for this time of year for us.
Well, lucky. That's great.
It's great. Yeah. So we're talking about, unmasking in the workplace. So I guess before we get into unmasking, let's talk about how you define masking, especially in the professional workplace setting.
So to me, masking is everything we do and everything we don't do to fit in environments that are very often not designed for all kinds of people in mind. They're not designed with everybody. So everybody has, in general, without even going into neurodivergence, we know that people are different. People have different sensibilities. People have different preferences and many times working styles and approaches to life. And that can be sometimes even more specific or pronounced when you're speaking about somebody who's neurodivergent and experiences the world in very different ways than, I guess, neurotypical or neuroconvergent people, which is a new term I recently heard, which was interesting to me.
Can you tell us more about that?
A friend of mine was telling me she talks about neurodivergence and neuroconvergence, and it seems almost like more inclusive way to put it, and it makes more sense because if you're going to define neurodivergent versus neurotypical, you're essentially describing people who are neurodivergent as different or off norm or like outside of some box that the neurotypical people fit into better. But in reality, and I think something that would especially benefit workplaces, we're all just people. We really are all just people defined by the things that make us unique and that differentiate us from each other, but we're all different from the next person. So kind of saying that a group of person are, typical or expected or, normal, and then us, the neurodivergent people, are like not normal and weird and all of these
different
things.
Yes.
It's just off, right? Like it's putting us automatically in this box. And especially in the workplace, that's where masking often starts happening because, everybody, or very often, especially, spaces that are more structured, big companies and things like that, they start doing things one way. And that one way is often, designed and devised for leadership and for the beginners. And often, these companies are legacy companies and older companies with very old-fashioned points of view. And nobody takes the time to say, well, what do we know today about people? What have we learned in the last decades? And we have learned to accept and to recognize a lot of different kinds of existing. But it doesn't translate into the workforce. And so people with neurodivergent minds often just feel like they don't fit. Maybe it's something as specific as a sensory thing like the fluorescent lighting, which definitely can be a lot for many of us, but maybe it has to do more with how often you have to interact face to face with people, or whether you're perceived as weird because your gaze wanders when you're thinking. And all of these things that really just make you be who you are. Like, I find myself in meetings so often just gazing off. And I'm probably going to do this many times today. If I start thinking, I'm going to stop thinking at the looking at the camera. I'm probably looking at you, Michelle, because I'm looking over there at the horizon, because that's how my brain works. Like, when I'm thinking, I kind of go a little bit into myself and I'm almost like focused on my own brain. And so my gaze just wanders and I let it. But at work, you kind of are not allowed to do that, because you're going to be labeled a certain kind of way, and you're going to be, antisocial, or you're not. And so it's really just you don't fit in. And we learn, especially through the years, how to fake it till we make it, right? How to force ourselves to maintain eye contact, how to survive the fluorescent lights for 8 hours and continue to be okay. But, it often...
Yes, with a headache at the end.
Exactly. You're going to end up burning out. You're going to end up having you're not going to even have the opportunity to really rest, because instead of resting at the end of the day, you're going to be recovering. And that takes a lot more work.
It does. Yeah. I really like that neuroconvergence concept.
Right?
That's really a nice way of describing the neurodivergent brain. I do wonder, like, as neurodivergent people, we know, whether it's ADHD or autism, dyslexia, we know that people do mask and we know about the concept. But what do you think people misunderstand about masking at work?
I think especially when somebody finally unmasks or comes out in their full selves and step into the light, it can often be like, oh, you were lying, or you were pretending, or you were faking, right? And that's not what you were doing. You were surviving, really. You were just doing your very best not to stand out in a space where it's not allowed to stand out. So, it can often be construed as just not being, but can you blame somebody for masking when unmasking comes at a risk more often than not? But there are a lot of just kind of preconceived ideas about what that is. And I feel like one of those, things about masking is that it ends up being seen as you're pretending.
I think that's true. I also think that people don't really understand what masking is, and maybe they do think that it is pretending or putting on a face, because then when they see someone outside of work, perhaps they see quite a different a different person, right? So especially where you might have smaller communities, or you work somewhere where you see people outside of work, that can be quite challenging,
Exactly.
I think.
Exactly. Especially if that happens. Sorry, especially if that happens out of plan, right? Like if you run into someone out of work who's neurodivergent and doesn't expect to be seen by coworkers, and then maybe they're dressing in their full selves, or maybe they're acting just like they are. And then people at work are going to be like, well, who are you? What are you doing? Why are you like this, kind of? And people get questioned.
Yes. Yeah, that's very true. The concept of masking is very interesting, I think, because when I first started Caboose, we've hosted these events for some time, and, different people with different perspectives come on to have a discussion about topics. And one of them in the early days was about masking, and we had a lot of late diagnosed people join the event. And I think one of the questions people grapple with is, for late diagnosed, how do you know if you're masking or not? Because a lot of us maybe have learnt just to fit in, or how to behave in a certain way. Do you have any sort of thoughts on how late diagnosed people navigate this?
That's really interesting. And that was a lot, kind of my experience. I kind of crashed and burned really by the time I was late diagnosed about 3 years ago. And it was, and that was happening at a time when work was very challenging. Not the work itself, what I was doing for work was fine, but the experience of working was becoming like a lot. And this is something that I was having. And, I think the moment you have to make any effort to fit in and you're not fulfilling work tasks, you're already masking, whether you know it or not. Like the moment that you have to spend your energy on your specific behavior and not on your output for work, which is really the one thing that should matter at work, like what you're producing are the solutions. I'm a very data-based person, and it's about whether you're delivering the task on due date and not being disrespectful to others, right? Like the way that you do that, whether you're smiling or not, like I said, as long as you're not being mean or being disrespectful, you should be able to be exactly who you are and continue doing your work. The moment you feel like some of your energy and some of your effort goes outside of that, and you're starting to feel like, how am I going to say this? And you're spending time preparing for these things, and like kind of you have anxiety before a meeting and things like that, then you're getting ready to mask, then you're masking, all of those things. For me, it was definitely, it was like everything made sense. Like the puzzle built itself the moment I had an answer for why I felt so different. I think a lot of us late diagnosed people, many of us feel different our whole lives, but we just don't have an explanation for it. We just think we're different, we're weird, we don't, and we don't have, and that not knowing makes us feel more hopeless, or at least it did me, right? I just, is there something wrong with me? And you question yourself and you blame yourself and you think it's a problem until you find out that you're just wired differently, that you just,
Yes.
and then kind of unmasking became so much easier for me when I finally had an answer to what was actually going on. I was like, okay, then this is
Yes.
just who I am. Then let me just embrace it.
Yeah. I think that's a lovely thing. We had a guest earlier this week or last week who described her ADHD diagnosis as refreshing, right? Suddenly she felt like she was thriving because she understood herself. And I think having the diagnosis it's almost like then you have permission to go, okay, I'm understanding now if the lights are too bright,
Exactly.
feel like you can go, somewhere to decompress, or that when you get home that maybe you need to have low light instead of the bright light. Some environments you can't control, or maybe there are some conversations around, how you work at work, whether you have headphones or, whether there's some quieter spaces to go. I think it's having the information and having the diagnosis allows us to then advocate for ourselves.
Exactly. I think so. I think that's definitely a factor.
Yeah, I guess, you've touched on this a bit, but when you think about workplaces, how do you think that sort of stigma and stereotypes keep people masking?
I think the more we go by, like, I think environments are often designed around stereotypes. A professional person means being like this. And there's like one way to be a professional person. And you look a certain way and you act a certain way and you produce things a certain way and you speak in a certain way. And so all of this is the stereotypical kind of professional high achiever. And you
Mm,
see that a lot. You see that from anywhere from like movies to very, very corporate spaces and things like that, where everybody kind of goes around acting the same because that's what's accepted. And so I think a lot of these spaces are just built around preconceived ideas of how you're supposed to be to succeed.
I think that's true. I think that there is this sort of perception that, if you're in this type of workplace, you can behave like this. And, if you're a leader, you have to behave like this. And, if you're
Exactly.
a leader, you need to be able to be performative and, maybe not quieter. And some people, I've
Exactly.
worked in various places and I see some people like to wear their headphones, but in some workplaces or for some managers, that's seen as being rude or that you're not
Exactly.
contributing to discussions, right? But yet we're not curious enough to ask, well, why does that person need to wear the headphones? And is there something else we could be doing to support that
Exactly.
person?
And it even goes by like specialties, right? By departments. There are so many stereotypes around, like, I saw, there are memes about it, and there are, funny pictures with Muppets about, when the when the IT person goes to visit the accountants. And it's like,
Yes.
and the accountants all have suits. And they're, and the accountants are like the angry dudes in the theater. And the IT person is, somebody that looks like a crazy Muppet. And, the IT person
Mm.
is always in the basement of the company, and they're
Yes,
weird
they're
and they're
very
this.
stereo. Yeah.
Yeah, and everybody is stereotype. And so it ends up being very limiting as to also about which kinds of jobs people can access. Because if you don't kind of fit some certain profile, you might not even consider it. Say if you're interviewing, you might not
It's
even be
true.
considered for a position because you don't fit this mold of how people in your profession are supposed to look like. They say there are professions where neurodivergent people thrive more than others, and there are places that are more male dominated or more female dominated. All of these things are informed and
Mm.
guided by stereotypes.
Yeah, that's true. It does make me think that, these stereotypes, they creep in from a young age and, maybe they do then inform people's choices of careers because there is this,
Yes.
stereotype. I also, one thing that, when you talked about clothing, it occurs to me that, we tend to maybe people, kids at school, right? We tend to start this process of masking from a very
Mm,
early age because you have to wear the school uniform in some locations.
yes.
The fabrics are not always very neurodivergent friendly. And so suddenly, as a child, you have to wear certain clothes, you have to wear certain fabrics. And so you then become someone who has to mask to get through the day. Maybe there's some internal stress because the clothing isn't very helpful to your
Yes.
neurotype and so it goes, right. And I guess when you think about, suits and all of those things, it's not so comfortable for neurodivergent people.
No, it's so stiff. And, and it's so true. I've recently come to really recognize how much my life changes when I'm wearing soft clothing. It just is different. If I get to be covered in softness, I'm happier. And I'm likely to be in a better mood all day. And so I've started buying more soft clothes whenever I can and really obsessing about it, right? And I say obsessive loosely, I'm joking, but I'm touching the inside of the shirts and finding out, is it going to be soft on the inside? I don't even care how it looks like on the outside. It just needs to be soft inside where my skin
Yes.
touches to be happy. And it's
Yes.
conducive to my having a better day. And so why not try to design a life that fits me so that I can be at my most comfortable and thus at my most productive? If I'm not
Mm.
distracted by factors that affect me, I can do my best work. I think that's what people miss out on the workplace so much, is that if they were to build inclusive workplaces, everybody would be at their best and everybody would
Right.
thrive, and that would make the company
It
thrive and
make
everybody would make
it would make every
more
yes.
money for everybody. Like, what are we doing? We're losing money
Okay.
literally by like being so
It's true.
closed off to people that are outside of the box.
It's true. I think that, then there's the absenteeism cost. People, if they have to mask so often and then there's burnout, then they
Hmm.
have to take the time off. They're not able to come to work.
Exactly.
So it is a snowball rush of
Absolutely.
things for the person and for or the organization. Which probably leads me to the next question, which is, can you talk a little bit about the effects of long-term masking on individuals? So whether that is emotional, physical, social impacts.
I think it's all of it combined. I think, in terms of emotional aspect, the emotional one, that's a heavy one because it really does affect you in on a deep emotional level. It can make you question you when you're masking, when you're having to fit in and sometimes not succeeding, or when you're so exhausted after a day of work that you can't function and you just lie there and you're like, I can't even talk. You start feeling, there's a risk of you starting to feel less than yourself, and you start questioning yourself and what's wrong with me and why am I like this and I don't want to be like this and why can't I be normal, and all of these things that just are the opposite of someone, like it blocks you sometimes from the ability to love and respect yourself because you see yourself struggling so much and you're like, why can't I be like the people who fit in more easily? And it can cause, I think, deep emotional effects because you see how you don't fit in, and it goes from childhood to, from not having friends at school or having fewer friends to struggling at work and struggling to continue at work, or having maybe a lot of jobs instead of having like a long tenure at one job and things like that, because you have to keep finding the place that fits you. Physiological, I mean, I've lived it. I think it can have so many effects. I think, there's the burnout, there's the just exhaustion at the end of the day, right? The losing absolutely the ability to function because you're so exhausted from the work day and the masking all day that you get home and you can't enjoy your own activities. Maybe you can't even eat. You just want to lie there in the dark, or, you just want to like dive into your TV shows and binge Netflix for 7 hours instead of doing
Yes.
all kinds of other things that might bring you more joy. But your brain is just so exhausted that you have to, you're physically unable to function at this point. I've been sick from burnout. I've been physically sick, and, I've lost all kinds of weight because I was so sick and I wasn't eating, and that was stress. And then I was a stick and a version of myself that wasn't healthy. And that was, all of
No.
these were effects of absolute burnout. Absolutely. And I think, and there was the social effect is also, if you're
Yeah.
struggling at work and you deplete your social battery to the point of extinction, you lose the ability to have a social life outside of work and to be able to interact with other people because
So
you're
true.
so exhausted. And now you're like, don't talk to me. I need to be alone. And maybe people are parents. People want to be with friends, and they're just not able to continue giving of themselves because they've had to use so much, just put so much effort into getting through meetings that don't fit them.
Yeah. That's so true. I mean, so many things you said there. I think, yes, it is this, cycle, right? Because at the end of the day, yes, you don't feel like socializing. You don't feel like, interacting at home. So you're watching TV or sitting in a low light. I think this is where that sort of self-compassion has to come in, right? You have to.
Yes.
And part of the diagnosis, I think, helps you be more compassionate because then you can say, okay, well, yes, I know that during the week, for example, maybe I'm not going to have the battery to go and do anything, but how do I make sure that there is some time, on a Friday or what have you, to ensure that there's time to socialize on a weekend, so you're not just recovering all weekend.
Right.
I know I admire people who can work all day and, then go and do lots of social things. For me, I think my ADHD brain, there's so many tabs open all day long that I get to the end and I go, okay, I couldn't think of anything worse than going to something
Going to
during
an
the
event.
week, networking event, or, come to our breakfast. It's, but they're the things that, quite often they're the things that workplaces expect. So,
Yeah. And that lead
yeah.
too often to growth, right? Very often it is the things that you do outside of
Yes.
the day that lead to the growth, right? If you're at the networking event after the work, you get noticed. You're more
Yes.
visible, and that may help you to get that promotion over somebody who never socializes outside of work. Or if you're willing to do the happy hour with your coworkers after the job, or, if you're the life of the party at the company retreat, all of those things can lead to you advancing professionally when,
Yes.
again, it should really
Yeah.
just be what you do at work that leads to advancement in the end.
Yeah.
The social life of someone shouldn't lead to a promotion, but very often it does, and
It
much
does.
more in some fields, much more than others. In some fields and in positions of leadership and things like that, that is very highly valued.
It is very highly valued, you're right, especially the more senior you get. And it reminds me of conversations, that I've had as a HR professional over the years around gender, because, quite often there's the sporting, requirements that come with leadership roles, or, the golfing or what have you. And men tend to play a sport. I mean, it's becoming, more prevalent for women to join. But if you're neurodivergent, you might not have that hand-eye coordination. And then if there's somehow, it's, tennis or something like that, and, you're not good at it, and,
Yeah. No.
So there are lots of things, right, that we don't always notice that can have an impact on differently brained people.
Yeah, for sure.
What are some tips for our audience, that are, like, I guess, small or realistic ways that people can start to unmask in a workplace that maybe they haven't been able to in the past?
I think the first thing that I would recommend or suggest, and that's especially because we still, it's still not everybody knows how safe it is to unmask. Not everybody knows, how much unmasking can do without somehow jeopardizing something. And I understand that, that's why it's important to take like really baby steps and start. And I would say find your people is one of the most kind of low-hanging fruit things that you can do. Is in every workplace, even if it's one person, there's somebody that you can trust. There's gonna be one person you can trust, and find that person and establish that relationship so that you can have one safe haven. And so maybe it's not something like, maybe unmasking, it's not possible at meetings or, throughout the day, but maybe you can have a coffee with that one person with whom you can be yourself, or you can take refuge in their office for 5 minutes and say, oh my gosh, overstimulated, can I just sit here? And they will not want you to talk, and they'll just let you sit in their office and be quiet. And, you can find people who will have your best interest at heart, who will have your back, who will want to be there for you, and, try to find them. And if you can build a little circle that's safe, even better. And I feel like I've always appreciated friendships that don't expect me to do anything to be friends. I love friendships friends that don't need me to establish a conversation at all times, where we can just sit there and just do nothing.
Yeah.
And it's fine.
Just enjoy the time.
Just enjoy the moment. Just enjoy the silence. Just hang out, especially when especially somebody that you can say, I'm overstimulated. Can I just be here for 5 minutes? And they'll be like, yeah, sure. And they'll keep working and they'll let you sit. And so you're like, okay, I feel safe, I feel protected, and I'm not, and it's not a transaction. Friends that don't expect it to be transactional and that you have to maintain the conversation, and friends that don't expect you to entertain them or and stuff like that. Like, I've always appreciated friends like that really just take it as it comes.
Accept
really.
You. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
As it is.
Yeah.
And with people with whom you can be low with. Even when you're not okay, you can open up about not being okay, and it's safe.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's the key word is, finding your people who you feel safe around. And it's certainly one of the reasons why we started Caboose, is so that people can find their people, find someone they connect with, share their diagnosis or their challenge, and also learn from each other, because, having these conversations about how do you unmask and, what does it look like, in a safe way is so helpful for people.
Yeah.
Do you think you can unmask without disclosing? Is it possible?
I think so.
Uh,
I think it's like an acrobatics act, right? It's like a balancing act. Like, how far do I go with the unmasking before people like start asking questions about like, well, why is this different? Why do you do things this way? Why don't you do things this way? Why do you do this? Why don't you do that? And so people are often gonna ask, but there are, it's possible to be yourself without having to like come out as neurodivergent. It's just, I think part of it is definitely finding those circles where you can be safe. But other things are like finding even like the ways that where like, is it possible to unmask and still fit in? One might be surprised that it can be possible. Like maybe sometimes you
yeah.
can find certain parts about yourself that you can let out that don't stand out. And so it's a little bit of a strategic balancing act, right? And you're like, how do I build a space where, oh, when I do this, there's, I still fit in. Like, I'm not, that's a dog. Like,
Yes,
it's
you can
like,
hear her crying here.
yeah. You can like, there may be some things like maybe there's a lot of people who already wear headphones, but not for neurodivergent reasons. And so you can just slide right into that bandwagon and wear your noise canceling ones, and people will think it's music. Maybe you get away with that. Maybe some people are listening to music and you're the only one just noise canceling everything away.
Yeah.
But you get away with it because people are used to listening to music at work. And so it doesn't call
That's right.
attention to you. So it's kind of like starting to pay attention at what things would help me. And then also like, just kind of, I guess something that one could try would be to ask, especially like people who have been there for longer. You can always go, especially to those
Yeah.
safe people, and start asking, hey, do you think you've been here for 10 years? So what do you think would happen if I started doing this differently? What do you think if I do this? And they can maybe help guide you and be like, oh, I think if you do that, people are going to ask questions. But, oh, I think if you do that, you'll be totally fine. Great. Let me try this first and see how that goes. And kind of like go step by step.
I think that's great advice, like asking, what would it look like if I started doing whatever. I think these days having headphones is something that,
Right.
Is more acceptable, but not always. But it is finding those ways. If you don't feel comfortable disclosing to your manager or your colleagues, then finding ways that you can unmask, without,
Right.
without sort of, I suppose, jeopardizing, your role and those sorts of things, it can be tricky, but, for example, maybe the clothing is one of those things, right? Finding sensory-friendly clothing or wearing something underneath. If you have to wear uniform, then, trying to sort of put some lining or something inside it. It's not easy, though, and even that in itself is a mental load for somebody to kind of navigate, right?
For sure.
Yeah. So, what's your advice, I guess, for navigating the fear as of being seen as different?
It's tricky, I think. I think it's still very much a double-edged sword in many, many places in this world. We're getting somewhere better, for sure. Like, I see a lot of progress happen, and I see a lot of workplaces that are making changes, that are embracing people of all kinds, including neurodivergent people. But I think navigating the fear can be really hard, and I still navigate it, right? Like I still feel or wonder sometimes, how is this going to play out? How is this going to go? Is this a risk? Is this not a risk? I think it's almost like trying to find that. I think it starts with accepting yourself a lot, and accepting yourself, like, regardless of what happens. And I know that that's, it's kind of like a risky thing to say, but sometimes you can overcome the fear by accepting that it comes at a risk. accepting that
Yes.
taking the step comes at a risk, and kind of being
Mhm.
prepared to accept the consequences, whether they may be A or B, right? And
Mm.
that, but you have, like, it comes with a certain kind of
Well, yeah.
making this decision to say, I'm going to do this because it's for my best, because it's going to bring
Mm.
me happiness in this and that way. And if this or this doesn't work, well, so be it, right? Like, it is what it is, but
Yes.
it'll make me healthier and happier and safer in the future.
Yeah, I've often spoken, like even to my kids and my son most recently about workplaces. Is if you can't actually get the job in a way that's inclusive, and if you can't be in the role where it is inclusive, then is it the right place long term?
Exactly. Is it a place where you're going to be able to thrive, or are you going to end up crashing and burning anyway?
Yeah, exactly. And are there things that you look out for that people would notice the workplace isn't safe for unmasking? What are the sort of signs that people might see?
I think first, like, the first thing that I would call out there is people who call each other out in public.
Yes,
Like,
absolutely.
when assigning blame in public, pointing out differences in public, when people get made fun of because of this reason, or like it's a place that turns people into jokes, or turns people into, like, that's a place where you can kind of suspect it's not going to be safe for you to
Mm.
disclose or unmask, or because people are already getting called out for being different for all kinds of reasons. So why wouldn't you
Yeah.
get called out for that? People who
Mm.
love to assign blame instead of finding a solution, people who focus on the problem, when
Yeah.
there are many jobs that don't like to look for solutions or don't like to look forward. They just are always looking at what went wrong and whose fault is it. They're always going to find a reason to point fingers. And so it's almost like they're
Mm.
already looking for targets. So maybe I don't provide myself as one of them. I
Mm.
think places that ask a lot of questions are safer. Places that
Yes.
care for how people are and ask questions, and from a manager asking you a person to person question, to even like places that run surveys and things, like workplaces that in some way are trying to find out what do my employees think and feel, are
Mm.
potentially a little bit safer than places that legitimately don't care about the people who work there.
Mm. I've seen recently, again, with my son, looking for a change in career, and some places that are doing these sort of one-way interviews that are very performative, right? How can you be yourself? What if you
Yeah.
stutter because you're nervous and you're talking to a camera, not a person? And,
Hate those.
it's not very inclusive right from the start. So I think that's also another way people can probably see that it might not be safe. I always
That's
think,
true.
the signals for safety too. People look for role models, like, is it okay to wear headphones? Is it okay to wear more comfortable clothing? Is it okay to be quieter? Is it okay to sit somewhere in a quiet space for a short time? So people sort of look, I think, for those signals that it is safe and okay. There's your dog.
That's mine.
Yeah. Well, see,
My boyfriend just
this
got home.
that's totally fine. I'm waiting for mine to have a big, meltdown. So, this is not a performative interview, even though we're recording it for YouTube.
It's a safe space.
It's a safe space. Yes. So they're the things that I look for. But I wonder what managers can do to support neurodivergent employees to.
I think one thing that I think, or I would hope every manager does, is to let everybody know that it's safe to be different. I don't know.
Or, yes, yourself,
Like,
safe to be yourself, right?
don't be yourself is exactly right.
Mm.
That's exactly the term. Like, a manager that doesn't wait for you to disclose. A manager that anticipates and on your first day tells you, if there, by the way, you're welcome in any shape or form. You're welcome to be yourself. You are welcome to be open about who you are. Let me know what you need. is there, if there's anything you ever want to tell me, it's a safe space. Like those keywords, I think, and the manager that doesn't wait for you to have to get over your fear and take a risk to find a safe place, the person that like opens those doors for you before you even ask to go through them is somebody that you can, that I would hope to have as a manager, somebody who also models that. A manager who themselves show who they really are, a manager that shows up at work and have their own idiosyncrasies, neurodivergent or not. We all like we all like things the way we like them.
We do.
And
yes,
so,
that's right.
everybody likes things a certain way. So if I see a manager already making space for themselves to be themselves, then it's probably okay for me to be myself too. Now, granted, a lot of times there's selfish people out there, and I'm not saying that it's not the case, but I would look for that. I mean, I would think that could be potentially a safe signal. A manager that shows up as themselves and invites you to do the same and role models that, right?
Yes.
Again, with asking the questions, right? Managers who ask you, how are you? Is there anything you need? Who do, managers who ask for recurrent meetings, and the meetings are not as much about tasks as they are about how are you doing? How's the week going? Is there anything going on that you would like to share? Is there, anything that I can help you with, that offer help without waiting for it to become something, that don't always expect the employee to take the first step in covering their needs.
I think that's so important, and I love that idea of on your first day or, regularly, that the check-in, I'm a big fan of making sure there's a regular check-in, and it's like not just on work tasks, but how are you? And, what's working for you, what's not working for you. I think it's equally then important that it's not just the manager, that actually the organization and other people around can support that too, because I think you can have a great manager, but if the vibe around is not supportive, then it does make it tricky, I think.
Absolutely. That's
now,
true.
at the start, I mentioned our neuro nuggets, and the way you and I met was through our request to have you join as a contributor to our neuro nuggets. So, can you tell us a little bit about that topic, which was overcoming stigma and unlocking strengths at work? Can you tell us a little bit about the neuro nugget and what inspired you to contribute that particular top to our library?
I think this is some of the topics that I explore, that I've been writing about for some time, and especially, at the time when I recorded them, there was something that was on my mind that I was kind of thinking about and trying to unpack. And it was, I think, a reflection of my own unmasking journey. Right? It's a little bit of, the kinds of things that I thought about and that impacted me, just kind of working through my own experience in what can I share about or related to how there's a lot of stigma out there, and stigma, stigma stereotypes, it's pretty much, kind of the same. And how do you get beyond that, beyond the fact, once you unmask, the cat's out of the bag. And so now people, now it's out there, and you might as well be wearing a neurodivergent t-shirt because nobody's going to forget it. And in certain workplaces, nobody's going to forget it. In workplaces that are open and safe and awesome, everybody's going to forget immediately because nobody's going to care. Nobody should care, right? Like, you should just be like, great, you're autistic. Congratulations. Let's move on with our day, because it's just the way, people should care only in the sense that they want to know how to be their best for you. And they might ask you, how can I show up for you better? But honestly, it's kind of comparable to coming out of the closet, right? Like, that's less and less becoming a topic. It shouldn't matter. And you see it less and less. People stop feeling the need to come out of the closet, because why should you? Like, you're just going to show up as you are. And why should I have to make a big announcement about who I like? In the same way, eventually there will be a day where you don't need a big announcement to explain the way your brain works, right? But we're still in a world where we come out of the closet and we disclose. And so once you disclose, there can be some stigmas, and you have to like kind of navigate through that and move past that. And you have to, and it comes with finding a certain resolve into just powering through. And I
Yes.
think that's a little bit
Yeah.
of what I explored in the series.
Yeah, great. Well, all of our audience listening, go over into Caboose and check out Neuronuggets, and you'll see Romina's profile there and her series on this. I think you're right. You know, I do hope one day we just get to a point where, like, differently brained people are accepted in, you know, wherever they are. Right? It's not like, hey, you walk up to work and say, hey, I'm neurotypical, so.
Right.
Or you know, like whatever you know, diversity lens you apply, you really shouldn't have to call it out. I remember I used to work at a place, you know, as a HR director, and the wonderful thing about that place was that we just didn't have any reference groups. There was nothing, you know, it wasn't like you had an LGBTQIA plus group or a
Nice.
neurodivergence group or a gender group. It was just, we are who we are, and
Exactly.
everyone just, yeah, it was just a lovely place to be. There was,
I love that.
you know, no judgment and lots of flexibilities. Yeah, so that's something I'll always remember. We do have a question from one of our audience members. Do you have any tips for explaining to family and friends the impacts that masking during the day can have when you arrive home, and why you might need some quiet space or quiet time, etc.?
Can you repeat the first part of the question?
Any tips for explaining to family or friends? So you get home,
Okay.
you know, you kind of have been masking all day, or, you know, you're overstimulated. You get home,
Yeah.
you know, it can
and
be
you
challenging,
can't-
right? You get home and
very
you're
much.
you're dysregulated, or, you know, there's immediately a trigger of some sort that, you know, maybe makes this worse for someone. So I guess tips to explain to family and friends.
I think to explain to family and friends, one tip would be to not wait until you're coming home from work needing that rest to offer your first explanation, right? I would kind of explain over the weekend one day, you know, when you first start feeling the need, you know, over breakfast, especially if you have, say, kids, you know, or you're going to have some responsibility at the end of the day to talk about it in the morning. This is something that you already expect, most likely. This is something that you know is going to happen at the end of the day. So maybe in the morning, kind of say, maybe you have a long day today. Maybe you have back-to-back meetings. And so you say, hey, today I'm looking at a very full day. So I'm probably going to be exhausted when I get home. So can this be a chill day? So when you get home and people might be expecting you and already kind of have spent the day waiting for you, it may be a little bit of a bigger hit for you to say, don't talk to me. I can't talk to anybody. And so, but if you talked about it in the morning and you're like, hey, I'm likely going to want to go and be alone all night, then, you know, everybody gets kind of the opportunity to adjust. Maybe you take a beat one day when you're together over the weekend, and say, you know, I've noticed that when I get home from work, I'm really exhausted and I don't find that I have the strength. And so, you know, just so you know, sometimes when I come home, I feel this way. And so, you know, I'll let you know when I get home, but it's because of this. And you can explain why it happens and take the time when you're in the mood and you have the energy to explain it and answer questions and really create a safe place for that to not just be heard, but also received and understood.
I think that's great. It's hard to remember that you need to do it outside of that moment, because I think that's when it first comes to mind, is you get home and things are kind of happening. I know, like, I'm not overly good at it all the time, but again, with the ADHD, you know, going all day.
Oh my God.
Quite often early, quite often then you're rushing to get home, you know, dinner. Yeah.
And what if you didn't, what if in the morning you didn't know that you were going to be exhausted at the end of the day? That's very possible too. Maybe you were in a sunny mood and you thought, I'm going to have a splendid day, and you didn't let anybody know anything because you were just like, you sang all your way to work, but you get there and there's 4 fires to be put out and everybody's in a bad mood. And by the time with lunch, you're like over everything and you're like, everybody ruined your day. So you're going to go home and you'll be like, and you're still going to be like, don't talk to me. So I guess I would recommend maybe just try to step out of that moment of being uncomfortable and try to offer a little bit of a space to explain before you retreat. So that the people who may be expecting time with you don't feel like it's against them in a way, so that it can't be accidentally seen as something that is reflecting on them. It's not reflecting on them at all. It's reflecting on the work day that you just had.
Yeah. Yeah, look, I think that's true. The unexpected is what sometimes catches you off guard.
For sure.
But I think if you apply your tip there, it's, remembering to maybe message ahead, hey, can you get,
maybe
the vegetables peeled, or can you? Yes, that's right. Yes. Hey, Siri, So, yeah, I think that's very good advice. Any other questions from our audience? Feel free to drop them in. Otherwise, we will be wrapping up soon. I just have one more curious question, like your thoughts on, NeuroNuggets is all about 6 to 8 minute micro learning modules. And I wonder if you have some views on, how that helps ADHDers consume content. If you could share your thoughts on that, that would be great.
For sure. Same for me, right? Like I don't have a long attention span and I get distracted very easily. I can't watch a movie without pausing it a couple of
Me
times.
neither. Yes, me neither.
Like nothing.
They're not my favorite things to go to.
I step out to the movie. In the movie theater, I'll go to the bathroom at least twice or once. And I'm not really going to the bathroom. I'm just moving. Like sometimes I'll stand in the middle of the theater on the side and watch the movie kind of sideways because I can't just sit in the same spot for 2 hours. It's too much. So I think the ability to take something to learn a little bit about tips and tools and resources to navigate your own ADHD, your own neurodivergence, and be able to consume it in bite pieces really empowers us to consume it in ways that fit us. You don't need to pretend like you can sit through a long video because you don't need to. The video is over before you got bored. And if you need to pause, still pause the NeuroNuggets. Feel free to pause it 1,000 times.
Yes, but and speed it up if you want to.
I do that with everything.
Me too, yeah.
I mean, Jesus, everybody, it's audios and everything gets 2x speed. But I think, it just, for me, learning happens in little pieces always. And I think a lot of us relate to that. I think these bite-sized nuggets of information are also easier to remember. I mean, I forget things easily. I have, like you, 1,000 tabs open on my computer and more in my brain at any given time. My boyfriend marvels at my computer because I have several desktops and each of them has several tabs. I mean, it's
me too.
It's wild. Like there are dozens of things happening at the same time at all times in my brain, always. And so I can't remember things. I'm not going to remember anything that is much longer than 6 minutes because it's going to get mixed up with all the other things. But if it's something that I can process quickly and digest quickly and then move on with my life and think about 5 different other things, then it's probably going to stick with me better.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I agree. I have the same amount of tabs open as you.
It's crazy.
And sometimes it's all good. And then sometimes it's like, whoa, I think I need to step down a bit.
Sometimes you can't see what the tabs are and you have to
No, well, I've started grouping mine so that I can at least see some of the tabs when I ungroup them. But, well, this was a great discussion. Thank you so much for joining us. We got there in the end and it was wonderful to have you join us. For the audience, you'll see the recording up on YouTube later today or over the weekend. Don't forget to go and check out NeuroNuggets in the Caboose app. We have a lot of other Divergent discussions scheduled for the coming months. You'll see those in the Caboose app or on our Humanitics site. So check those out and have a great weekend, everybody.
Thank you so much for having me. It was awesome.